Hi, I'm David. Welcome to my channel where I like to DIY renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. In this video, I'm going to be taking this 5,000 watt Growatt inverter, and if you want to see the introduction to this inverter, check out my previous video. Just as a really quick rundown on what we're doing, we're capturing solar energy using these solar panels. We're then sending that solar energy into the batteries. All of that solar energy is stored inside this battery bank as 48 volts DC. This is about 30 kilowatt hours worth of storage. It's sent in as 48 volts DC to this Growatt brand inverter, which is then producing 240 volts alternating current, or AC. We're sending that 240 volts into this circuit breaker box. We're using this auto transformer to produce a neutral so that we split the 240 volts coming in half, and then we have 120 and 120. Then we can finally plug in our stuff to do work. And I'm setting all of this up so that we can fully test this inverter with a bunch of power tools. Here we go. This inverter is putting out 240 volts, which means it maxed out, it's just under 21 amps. Now, even if I factor in the 25% continuous duty requirement, that's still, I think, 26 amps. So I was originally planning on just using 30 amp circuit breakers with 10 gauge wire connecting the two. However, in the manual on page 9, it says 50 amp breaker with at least 8 gauge wire. So I did go out and pick up a 50 amp circuit breaker, which we're going to be backfeeding from the Growatt into the 50 amp circuit breaker. Now, I don't have any 8 gauge wire on hand, so we're going to be using some of this 6 gauge wire. So this 6 gauge wire is a little bit overkill, but that's okay. I did check and it just barely makes it into the terminals on the inverter. So it will fit, but I don't think you could squeeze any more than a 6 gauge wire in there. It's a tight fit. I also hooked up the battery with my watt meter over here connected to the Growatt inverter. That way we're going to see how many watts are moving in. So in this video, we're also going to be able to calculate what our efficiency is. Now, for the efficiency test, I also picked up this little watt meter, and I'll leave links for these things in the description below. But this little watt meter is going to be specific for alternating current, which is why we have a little clamp, CT clamp, instead of, in this case, for the DC side, we're using a shunt. But we're going to be able to get roughly what our efficiency is. We'll check that at a few different points depending on what our loads are, so we kind of get a rough map of what we're doing. Now, if anybody knows why the manual is suggesting a 50 amp breaker with 8 gauge wire, when I think a 30 amp breaker with 10 gauge wire would have sufficed, please let me know in the comments below. Now, if anybody wants the transformer, inverter, batteries, I'll leave a link to Signature Solar in the description below, and you can use the coupon code, which is DavidPause. That gets you 5% off. Thank you. All right, so this is a little metal box which is going to hold the outlet. Oh, we're so close to opening up this auto transformer. All right, let me show you what I've done. I've got 2 outlets, each going to the different phases through these GFCIs. These are plug-on neutral, which is why the white wire is going to the circuit breaker. Kind of neat. It's a plug-on neutral right there to this central bar. So this is a neutral bar, and this is a neutral bar, and those are both bonded up here to that plug-on neutral, right at that point. So it's kind of a neat way to do it. I have not yet made the ground to neutral connection, which would happen right there if I tighten that screw down, because I'm not 100% sure if there's a ground to neutral connection in the inverter. I don't think so. So I think I need that screw, but I'm going to wait till I turn it on, double check that. We have the grounding bar. So our 2 outlets for the power tools. I still have this circuit breaker is run over there to that water heater. And this circuit breaker I ran over here to this monitor. We'll be able to pull efficiency numbers. With this monitor, we can check how many watts are going in, and with this monitor, how many watts are coming out. It's on one of the legs, but it's wired to both phases. So we'll be able to see exactly how many watts and get the efficiency. Oh, we're so close. All right, let me change cameras and we'll crack open this Solar Edge inverter. Oh, it's so much smaller than it looks. Wow. Look at, it's so tiny. Oh, based on the box, I thought this was going to be a lot bigger. But, oh, it's so small. All right, well, looks like we have a knockout. We have a big aluminum heat sink on the back. That's where this would snap in. That looks good. Kind of neat. Oh man. All right, let's check out the data plate. Well, here's the auto transformer, TX5000. So right here, it's a 5000 VA or volt amp. It's kind of like saying watts, but not exactly. So it says maximum continuous current line to line is 21 amps. I'm going to be putting this on a 30 amp breaker right now and connecting it with 10 gauge wire, but I might have to see if I can find a 21 amp, or I might have to put it on a 20 amp. But you know, if you guys know the answer, let me know in the comments below. So we're going to need an Allen key, and so let me go grab an Allen key for that. These are 5mm. All right. Well, it looks like this is molded plastic, and we have some kind of gasket embedded in the aluminum housing. Wow. Look at that. It's so cute. When I saw photos of this before, I thought it'd be so much bigger, but look at that. In comparison, there's my hand. So it's not actually that big, but it is deceivingly heavy for its size because you have the iron core. So we've got L1, L2, and neutral, and then this one over here is going to be a temperature sensor. So that's neat. The temperature sensor runs right inside there, so it's going to be reading the inside temperature. That's great. And a grounding screw. So let's see here. Oh, there we go. That popped out easy. So there we go, everybody. Isn't that exciting? That's how we make a neutral. We take the auto transformer, we pop it in a circuit breaker, and then we have a neutral coming off the auto transformer going to the neutral bar inside the circuit breaker box. I mean, it's really a simple hookup. Why bother doing this instead of just buying 120 volt inverters that can parallel? It's a good question, because I personally have two inverters that are both 120 volts, and I paralleled them up. Now the thing is that you are maxed out on which phase you can have. So you can have an imbalance, but only up to the point where one inverter is maxed out. And then that's it. So in my case, I have two SMA Sunny Island inverters. Each one is about 6,000 watts. So I max out at 6,000 watts per phase. So even if the other phase has nothing on it, that's it. That's all I have then is 6,000 watts, even though the combined total of the two inverters is 12,000 watts. Now in this case, it's a 5,000 watt inverter, and despite the imbalance, I still have 5,000 watts total that I can use, which means that I can go more than 2,500 watts per phase. If I had two, say, 2,500 watt inverters side by side, I'm maxed out at 2,500 watts per phase. The other thing is that I did test a LV5048 in the past, which has two 2,500 watt inverters inside one case, which means that I was maxed out per phase, and I could not start my power tools on a 2,500 watt inverter. In this case, I should have a better chance at starting my power tools because of two things. One, I have a 5,000 watt inverter instead of a 2,500 watt inverter, but I also have kind of an extra flywheel effect, the magnetic flux of the iron core. Well, I'm definitely not an electrical engineer, so I can't describe exactly how that kind of magnetic flux inductance thing helps, but the transformer should help in starting my power tools. Also, what this means is that I can add on one more inverter or two more inverters. I could have three inverters without having to always get matched pairs and go two at a time, as you would if you were doing 120 volt inverters. And this single transformer can handle multiple of these. You don't necessarily have to have one auto transformer for every one inverter. So I could have three of these 5,000 watt inverters and one auto transformer. Now I'll demonstrate why that is coming up here in the video. I think it's finally time to start turning some things on. This circuit breaker is off. Let's turn that on. Now let's go inside here and we'll turn on some of these. And when I turn these on, that will now charge the capacitor inside. Now we'll get all these on. It says 53 volts for the battery. And I heard it just click on. So 240 volts output. Let's see what it's drawing right now. 79 watts. So I'm going to give it 5 minutes and come back. After 5 minutes, we'll see if that wattage drops. Maybe it's just high when it first starts, but I want to see what the idle load is. Remember, everything is off right now. So we are currently not consuming any power. Well, it's been 5 minutes. This is still inverting, and it looks like it has dropped to 70 watts. That's a bit higher than the manual said. The manual said 60 watts, but we're pulling 70 watts in idle. We're ready to start turning on switches, aren't we? Yes. All right. So this is super exciting. The inverter's on and it's producing power. I'm going to switch on the circuit breaker. Okay, here we go. So we switched on the circuit breaker and nothing else is on yet. Now I'm going to switch on the next circuit breaker. The next circuit breaker that I switch on is going to turn on the monitor. All right, so here's the monitor. So we have 240 volts, 0 watts, and we're at 60 hertz. So next item on the list, the auto transformer. Here we go with the auto transformer. We're going to find out how many watts this draws in idle. Oh, I hear a little hum coming off the auto transformer. So you can see the auto transformer is pulling 16.7 watts in idle. And we are drawing 80 watts. So 80 watts for the auto transformer being on and the inverter on. So this is really exciting. Now we're going to check at our voltage here. So here's AC volts. So can you see that? Mm-hmm. Okay. So Elena here is going to be checking the voltmeter. So first thing we'll do is check the two big bus bars. And we have 240 volts. Can you see where I'm holding these? So 240 volts. Now what we'll do is check from one hot leg to the neutral. And it's 120 volts. that's it. We did it. We got a neutral. We split the single phase 240 into two 120 volt phases. Ha! All right, let's check the other bus bars. I'm keeping one probe on the neutral bar, and I'm jumping to the other hot leg. It's also 120. Woo! We did it! All right, now let me check to the other neutral bar, because there's two neutral bars in this, and they should be connected. Yes, they are. Jumping over, 120. Ha! So we totally did it. We have 120 volts. Oh man, that's awesome. So now I'm going to take this 120 volt space heater, and let's plug the space heater in to one of the hot legs. Oh, I have to turn these on. All right, so we have one heater on. The fan of the Growatt inverter just kicked on. And let's come over here and take a look at our amps. So our AC amps were plugged into this one. On here, we can see that we're pulling 1.5 kilowatts. We're pulling 6.3 amps. So that's going to be 6.3 amps on both of the hot legs. So the point is that we have two equal 6.4 and about 6.4. So we're drawing equal amps on each of these hot legs. But now we'll jump over to the neutral, which is coming off the auto transformer, and we have 12.9 amps off the auto transformer. Off one of the hot legs, 6.3, and off the other one, 6.3. This is supplying an even amount on both of the hot legs, and then the neutral is actually supplying double that because we are only having a load on one of the neutral legs. Isn't that exciting? Next, I'll take another heater and I'm going to plug it into the other phase. So right here. So here's where things get really exciting. This heater is plugged into this one, which is on one of the phases. And I plug this little heater into this phase, but it's not on yet. Currently, off the neutral, we have 12.9. Now watch what happens when I turn on this other space heater. It drops. Ha! But our total watts has gone up. 1.8 kilowatts instead of 1.5. So the total power has gone up, but the load on the neutral has gone down because the two phases are balancing each other out a little bit. So when I first learned about this, it totally blew my mind. So even though we have a bigger load with two heaters on, and the inverter is doing more work to power two heaters instead of one, the auto transformer is doing less work. And the total watts that are now feeding into the auto transformer have gone down. This is just so cool. So long as you don't have an unbalanced load, I mean, this is just totally amazing. All right, now that we're done with that really exciting part, we're gonna get into a few more tests. Let's see if there's a ground to neutral, then we'll do an overload test, then we'll start plugging in some power tools. All right, so right now I have my multimeter here. So if there's continuity between the two probes, we'll hear a beep. So now I'm going to check between the grounding bar and any neutral. Yeah, there's 4 neutral points in here, and I'm not getting anything for them. So that means that we will have to add the screw to this to do the neutral to ground bond inside the panel. All right, now let's start overloading things. All right, so at this point, let's turn on the water heater. All right, so we have a water heater in that bucket, and let's go ahead and turn it on right here. And 4.2 kilowatts. Over here we have 5.19 kilowatts. All right, so we are gonna boil that water. All right, so next let's turn on this little heater. And and we're at 4.5. All right, let's try turning that off, and we'll turn this on. Oh, and it's beeping. All right, so we put this on low, and let's see what happens on low. 4.95 kilowatts. We're drawing 4.95 kilowatts, and the inverter has not shut down. That's so cool. Let's see what it says up here. It says 97.4%. Ha! All right, at this point, let's add the 250 watts for this little heater. And kick that on. And it says 5.2 kilowatts. So we're drawing more kilowatts than it's rated for. Up over here it says 102%. Wow. And it hasn't shut off yet. All right, I'm gonna shut that down. That's so cool. So now we'll try it in high. So we'll change this to high. Oh, eco, high. It says 5.6 kilowatts, 110%. So we're drawing 110% from this inverter, and it hasn't blown up yet. 5.6 kilowatts. And it's still doing it. All right, let's try turning this on. Oh, and it's starting to beep, so it's going to shut itself down. Let's see what happens. That's at 5.8. So we were at 5.8 for a sec, and this shut itself down. Still has power. Well, that's beautiful. The inverter has shut itself down without blowing up. All right, so let's go switch it off. All right, now we can switch this back on. Let's turn off the water heater and switch it. We'll switch it back on. And it's doing it. Well, almost. Let's wait for it to start inverting. But that is so exciting that it didn't blow up. It did its job. It actually overloaded for a short period of time. That's great. That was at like 118%. That was 5.8 kilowatts from a 5,000 watt inverter. So I didn't think we'd be able to overload it. All right, we're back to inverting. Yeah, everything's off right now. It's all off. All right, now we can start trying some power tools. Okay, so I got to bring some power tools around to over here, and we'll start turning them on. There's the 11 amp vacuum, and I've just got it on the back of this saw. This is a 15 amp saw and this big chunk of oak here. So this is how I like to test it. I'll be pushing it through. I have a fairly new blade. This is a thin kerf Diablo blade. Yeah, so we're currently drawing 18 watts. That's just for the auto transformer. Nothing else is currently turned on. But we do have both circuit breakers are on for the for these guys. So once I plug this in, this is the shop vac. So we'll plug this in. And now this is the miter saw. And the light just turned on for the miter saw. All right, here we go. Ready? Can it do it? Ha! It takes it on. Ha! It totally did it. I actually was pushing that, and that felt the same as when it's on grid power. Some of you who've watched my channel, you might remember that I've tested this with other inverters, and sometimes I have to go really slow with it. Not in this case. So that was really awesome. Okay, next I'm going to set up my clamps down here, and I'm gonna turn these on and we'll take a closer look at what happens on the two separate. You know what might be fun? Let's try the same test but on the same phase and see if it can do it. Okay, so I just moved this cord over so we're plugged into one phase, and that's gonna go over here to a 20 amp. We might blow the 20 amp breaker, who knows? All right. Oh, this is fun. All right, let's try it. So if I turn this on, let's see which one. It's going to the upper one. Okay, shop back on. We'll try the oak again. It did it! We did it again on the same phase. We busted through that. That's awesome. Let's see how many amps we're pulling on the neutral when we do that. That's just the shop vac. And now I'm going to turn this on, but I'll leave it over here so we can watch the amps. Oh, that was fun. All right, next we're gonna throw some more amps on here. So all of these are reading amps right now. You see we have 0 amps on the neutral, which is the orange one, and this is gonna be like L1 and L2. And you see they are pulling some amps because the auto transformer is gonna always pull some amount of load. That's 18 watts that we saw before. So the shop vac and the miter saw are on 2 different phases, so we can watch what happens here. So I'm going to switch on. So as I switch this on over here, we're going to switch on the miter saw. And now I'm going to switch on the miter saw here. I find that super exciting, that when the wet dry vacuum and the miter saw are both running, but they're on different phases, almost no amps are moving through the auto transformer. It's balanced out the 2 phases between each other, and all of that load is just going off on the 240 volt side. None is going through the auto transformer. And this is why you can hook up multiple 240 volt inverters with just one small auto transformer. You don't need a giant auto transformer for everything. So this is fairly new information for me, which is why it's so exciting. Maybe 6 months ago or something I learned about this, about how the 2 phases balance each other out and you get nothing on the neutral. So now you can buy the 240 volt inverters and add them up. Anyways, it's fun, it's neat, it's something different. There's certainly nothing wrong if you want to go with 2 separate 120 volt inverters. That's what I currently am running my house with. But there is some limitations to that. So what we've got here is kind of a hybrid situation. We have a high frequency inverter with no transformer on the inverter, but then we're adding a transformer to it. And when this happens, this miter saw is performing just like it does when I have it plugged into the grid power. This is performing just as well, cutting through just as quickly. I don't feel it struggling like I do on some other high frequency inverters. Oh, I still need to test my air compressor. That is hard to start up. So let me grab the air compressor over here and we'll try starting it. Okay, here's the air compressor that I use. This is a 13 amp. It says 2 horsepower. It's from Harbor Freight. We currently have just under 90 psi, so I might have to release some air, which I'll do there if needed. So I've got the air compressor plugged in here with the circuit breakers on, and let's go ahead and try turning it on. It did it! It started it up! All right, now let's plug in the shop vac on the same one. Shop vac is running. All right, now let's try the miter saw. Okay, we're gonna do the miter saw with that stuff. Yes! It did it. It did all 3 pieces. We spiked over 5 kilowatts when I turned this saw on. The air compressor turned itself off when it got to pressure. I mean, this is a success. This is good. It's a lot better than I thought a cheap inverter was going to do. Now, if we're going to be totally honest, I was expecting that inverter to shut down. This is a high frequency inverter, and I thought it was going to fail. I thought it was going to shut itself down at a minimum, worst case, blow itself up, but it didn't. But I did not think that was going to be able to handle the air compressor, just because so few do. So this inverter performed well. So let's recap. This inverter drew 70 watts when it was just sitting here doing nothing. But interestingly enough, when we put an 18 watt load on for the auto transformer, the total that it drew from the battery was 80 watts. So it did drop down to that 60 watt once there was a little bit of a load on it. So that was kind of interesting. But let's look at the package of auto transformer with inverter, and that was 80 watts. Now that's not as efficient as some other options out there. To put this in perspective, I used to own an Ames brand low frequency inverter that had a transformer built in. So it already put out the 120/240 split phase. That was 66 watts in idle. And you can check out the link in the description below to that old video where I tested that. Now that would have been more efficient because that was 6 kilowatts with a 66 watt idle. And this package is a 5 kilowatt package with a 80 watt idle draw. So not as efficient. However, the Ames inverter had no solar MPPT built in, and this can take up to 6,000 watts of solar, which I should be testing in a future video. Also, this inverter can parallel with more, and the Ames inverter couldn't. So there's some additional features built into this one that are not in the Ames. So I'm not trying to say that this is necessarily better or worse of a choice. I'm just trying to give you the information about some things to keep in mind when you're searching through all the different inverter possibilities that are out there. This is a good option for some people in some situations. Now I found it really exciting to see what the auto transformer could do. I mean, it's relatively small, even though it's very heavy for its size, and it really did great. I mean, when you kind of split the load on 2 different phases, the auto transformer is not even seeing anything going through it. This is why you can parallel more than one of the Growatt inverters to just one auto transformer. So you could have 2 Growatt inverters, 10,000 watts, with just one auto transformer. Or you could have 3 with 15 kilowatts of Growatt inverters with one auto transformer. Now when you build out your load center, the circuit breaker box, you don't have to stress about making sure that they're balanced. They're just generally going to be balanced so long as you're not actively trying to make your load center unbalanced. Don't put all of the 120 volt loads on phase 1. So I hope everybody found this fun. Please remember, I'm just a DIYer working out in my garage, sharing with you the fun projects that I'm playing with, but I am not a licensed electrician, so you will have to consult your own local codes, all of that good stuff that we should all be doing anyways. I hope everybody stays safe and has fun. I just get a kick out of this stuff and testing these things. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.